If you remember back to a previous video, I talked about the three different types of conversations. Number one was light vibing, number two was ideas, facts, and opinions, and number three was an emotional connection. And so far, I talked about how you can improve your conversations when it comes to facts, ideas, and opinions. I gave you techniques like conversation threading, and I showed you how you can ask the right types of questions and how you can make statements to make your conversations flow more smoothly. I also gave you some tips for how you can improve your emotional connection part of conversation. First of all, I gave you tips for how you can uncover other people's emotional motivations, their feelings, their values. And then in the last video, I also showed you how having strong opinions and using the technique of emotional words and I statements allows you to expose your own motivations and your own feelings and your own views, and it allows people to get to know you more easily. So basically, I've given you some techniques for two areas of conversation, but so far I haven't really talked about the first area of conversation, which is light vibing. And that's what I'm going to do in this video. I'm going to explain to you more about what it is and how you can get better at this type of conversation. So, in order to become good at the light vibing type of conversation, you have to learn how to go from being serious and logical to being more light and fun. So many shy and introverted people are very logical, deep thinkers. I'm sure just by listening to this program, you can tell that I tend to be like a very logical type of thinker. And this is not uncommon. It's not uncommon for them to have a job as an engineer, a computer programmer, and so on. And this means that you may be used to thinking very logically all the time. And the brain is funny in that the more that you do something, the better you get at it. So if you spend 10 hours a day playing tennis, then you will get better. And not only will you get better at playing tennis, but your brain will actually physically change to adapt to your actions. This is what scientists call neuroplasticity. So your brain creates more neural connections in the parts of your brain needed to play tennis. If you play it a lot, which over time makes you into a tennis playing genius. You can almost think about this like building muscle. The more you use a certain muscle group, the bigger it gets, which allows you to lift more in the future. So, in the same way, if you use a certain part of your brain a lot, then that part of your brain grows, but your brain also shrinks the parts of your brain that you don't use as much. It's the same as if you built up a lot of muscle and then you stop working out. If you stop working out, then your muscles start to shrink because you aren't using them anymore. So your brain will physically shrink and even remove those parts of your brain, those neural connections that you don't use very often. In psychology, this is called synaptic pruning. And this is the dark side to being very logical all day. If you're logical, then you aren't able to use different parts of your brain, like the emotional, light, and fun part, and that makes it shrink. Logic is the opposite of emotion when it comes to socializing. When you're in a very logical state of mind all the time, you'll find it difficult to do things that require the use of the emotional part of your brain. The logical part of your brain is what you use when you're solving some mental problem, when you're being serious and concentrated, and when you're trying to reach some goal. For example, when I'm explaining this idea to you right now, and when you're trying to learn things and understand it, we're both using the logical parts of our brain. You're also using the logical part of your brain when you're in a business meeting or a job interview and you're talking to people in order to accomplish something or to either learn something or to teach something to other people. On the other hand, the emotional part of your brain is what you use when you're having fun, when you're being spontaneous, and when you're talking freely. Whenever you're talking to someone just for the sake of talking and sharing good emotions between you two, you're using the emotional part of your brain. Think in the past to a conversation you had that didn't make much sense logically, but you were talking just to share a good atmosphere between you and someone else. That's also about using the emotional part of your brain. So in order to become good at the light vibing part of conversation, at that type of small talk, or at the type of more light joking, fun type of conversation that you might hear in group conversations or at parties, in order to be good at this type of conversation, you have to become good at accessing the emotional part of your brain. So in the long term, how do you do this? Well, in the long term, by being logical and not emotional for hours a day, you start to weaken your social muscles. It becomes more and more difficult to use the emotional, light, fun part of your brain when you need it. So for example, if you're like a computer programmer, or if your job involves you having to do a lot of deep thinking, then you might, go to a party and you'll see people having fun, and you won't be able to relate to it. So in the long term of your overall life, you have to make sure that you use the emotional, fun-loving part of your brain on a consistent basis. Every day, try to joke around with someone. Try to talk in a more spontaneous way using the methods I'll be showing you in a later module. So try to have at least one conversation a day that puts you into this type of light, fun, illogical type of headspace. And now, how do you do vibing in the short term? So let's imagine that you have a very logical job that you've been doing all day, and then later you have to meet up with some people. Maybe you're going to a party, and you need to get yourself more into that emotional headspace, that emotional vibing headspace. So how do you do it? Well, if you've been doing logical things all day, you won't be able to just snap into the emotional part of your brain. At least not usually. For example, if you've been doing math homework for the past 2 hours, then you'll probably still be stuck in the logical mode. And it's going to be very difficult to simply go up to someone right away after you've been doing math and start having fun with them and cracking jokes. You're probably still going to feel very serious and analytical and not really in the mood for having fun. So here's some techniques for changing your mood. These are techniques which I found very useful for myself in order to get myself out of a logical mood into a more emotional, light, fun, vibing type of mood. The first technique is to get some momentum. So have you ever had a day where you spent a lot of time talking to many different people and just having a good time? By the end of that day, you probably found that making conversation became absolutely effortless. This is because you basically spent so much time that day practicing being in the emotional state of mind throughout the day. You gained a certain type of momentum that made it very easy to have fun. On the other hand, when you're in a logical state of mind, you have none of this momentum. You're trying to run from a standing start, and talking to people and trying to have light, vibing conversations with them is gonna be difficult, and it'll feel like you're trying to run uphill. The most social people I know have structured their lives so that they basically spend a lot of time each day using their social skills and practicing being in this light vibing state of mind. So, for example, if your job involves talking to a lot of different people all day, then you'll probably find it a lot easier to be able to effortlessly do light vibing with people once your workday is finished. On the other hand, if you're stuck behind a computer all day, then it's going to be much harder. So, if you are stuck behind a computer all day, then try to find other activities that you can do on a regular basis that get you into that emotional state of mind. So maybe you could join a club. Maybe you could find a theater class, like an improvisation theater class nearby, where you could practice being more spontaneous and fun. Maybe you could simply be more proactive about inviting a friend over once or twice a week and doing something fun with them, like playing video games and yelling at the TV, right? Anything you can do in order to get momentum over the week, in order to get yourself into that more emotional state of mind, is going to help you if you want to become better at the light vibing type of conversations. The second technique to get more into that emotional mood where you're in the mood to do light vibing with people is to ease yourself into it. So if you're in a more logical mood, then you can first try talking to someone in a logical way just to get used to talking again, and then slowly switch to having a bit more fun and playfulness to your conversation. So for example, I run, an online business basically. So if I've been working behind my computer all day, I might be in a very logical state of mind. So if I go to meet a friend later, I might talk to that friend in the beginning in a more logical type of way. We might kind of talk about more logical type subjects. And then as I kind of get my mouth moving, my brain starts to access that more social, fun, light, vibing part of itself. And I found that I can switch from talking more logically to having a bit more fun and playfulness. So if you have some kind of party you have to go to later, or if there's some networking event that you have to go to sometime where you know that you might have to meet a bunch of people, then it might be very useful to warm up by meeting up with a friend or by calling a friend on the phone. And then it's going to be easier to have a more light, vibing conversation with a different person later because you're more in the mood. A third technique for accessing that more light, vibing part of your brain is to voice agreement. And this is especially useful in group conversations. So this technique is very simple too. Basically, if you're standing in a group where a lot of people are talking in a group conversation, and you're still in kind of a logical headspace, you're not really part of that fun, vibing conversation because you're still thinking too logically, then all you have to do is make small comments every so often and voice agreement. So every once in a while, after someone says something, you can simply say, "Yeah, right," or "Really?" Just make little comments like that. And making these types of small comments in group conversations will allow you to stay in the conversation. See, what I found before, back when I used to be a lot more shy, is because I would often become invisible because I was in a very logical mood. I couldn't think of what to say in the group conversation, so I just stayed silent. But by using this technique, it also kind of got my mouth moving. I felt like I was part of the conversation. And since I was speaking up and saying something, anything, people knew that I was there. And by saying small things, just voicing agreement with what other people were saying, I found that I could kind of warm up a bit, and I was able to also speak up, and then after a couple minutes I was able to make real comments much more often as well. So I'll give you an example. Let's imagine you're in a group conversation between you and two or three other people, and a guy called Joe says, "Have you guys heard what happened to the mayor of Toronto?" And then you could say something really simple like, "No, what happened?" And then the other person could say, "He was caught smoking drugs." And then another guy might say, "I can't believe he got away with it for so long." And then you could again voice agreement and say, "Yeah, I know." And then another guy can make another comment, and so on and so forth. These types of comments are very, very normal to make in group conversations. In fact, next time you can hear a group conversation, notice how there's always, one or two people who are making comments like, yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, right. And by making these types of comments where you're not really saying anything, but you're starting to get involved in the conversation, you can actually get yourself more into that light, vibing mood. So that's 3 techniques that you can use in order to become better at the light, vibing type of conversations. Number 1 was gain momentum. This means you should be structuring your life so that you have things going on every week that get you into this more emotional light headspace. So for example, you could try to join an improv class, or make more of an effort to invite your friends to do fun things. Number 2 is ease into it. So before you have to go to a party or to a similar situation, you can first call up a friend or talk to someone else in a more logical way just to get your mouth moving. And number 3 is voicing agreement. This means you just make small comments while in a group conversation so that you can just sort of get into the mood of actually talking. And actually, these techniques are just the very surface of what I'm going to be sharing with you later. In modules 3 and 4 about mindsets and your true self, I'm going to talk a lot more about specific, very powerful techniques you can use to become more spontaneous, more expressive in conversations. And I'll probably also include a section about how to include humor in your conversation and how to be funny. But for now, I hope this video gave you at least a couple of useful tips you can use.